Welcome to Granite's Edge, a Republican-led legislative action program bringing information to our residents of Pelham and New Hampshire. News about legislation that's happening right now in our state capital of Concord that will affect you. Why are we called Granite's Edge? Our small town of Pelham, New Hampshire is located on the southern border of our wonderful Granite state, so we're right on the edge. And as all of you know, that edge is exactly what we have over others. Granite's Edge. In this program, we'll take a dive into some of the most important legislation of this session. We'll talk to legislators about the challenges in our state and about the committees they serve on. And every month, we'll have a special guest, someone who's an expert in their field who will bring you the truth about important topics that are linked to important legislation that may affect your liberty and freedom. Your host today is Herschel Nunez, an elected state representative right here from Pelham, New Hampshire, who thinks it's important that you know what the legislators know. So stay tuned. We have a great show for you today.
Hello and welcome to Granite's Edge. We've been away for a little while and we're coming back, but we're taking a little bit of a right turn this month. Normally we bring you some legislative information from the State House on bills that are going up for vote for your representatives and your senators. However, we had just started session and we just really don't have that information ready for you yet. So in that right turn we're taking, we're very, very pleased that we're going to spend a whole hour with a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Lyn Ulbricht, and she is the mother of Ross Ulbricht, who was given a double life plus 40-year sentence for a nonviolent crime. We're going to talk about that story. She's going to tell you the story. And we're also going to talk with a guest, Ross Connolly, criminal justice reform activist, is going to join us, and we're going to talk about some things that are going on at the federal level that may be able to help out in this case. We're looking to President Trump to help us out, so you guys stay tuned and we'll get on with the program just shortly. Hi, Lyn. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Herschel. Good to see you.
Hi, Ross. It's good to see you. In full disclosure to everybody, to the audience, we all know each other. We're friends. But this is a very, very important subject, and we had an opportunity to get Lyn in front of the cameras to talk to all of our viewers about this case that it seems so important that we try to help out this young man. Lyn, a lot of people don't really know the story about Ross and about Silk Road. So can you sort of give us a little bit of an overview here to bring everybody up to speed, to let them know about how all of this transpired and what's been going on?
Sure. Well, when my son Ross was 26 years old, he was an idealistic libertarian. He was on fire for freedom, free markets, and the potential for monetary freedom of Bitcoin, which was very unknown at the time. And he really wanted people to have the experience of a free market, and he created a website called Silk Road. And by the way, he's a first-time offender. He's gotten a this double life sentence plus 40 years, all nonviolent charges, first-time offender, no criminal record whatsoever, no history of violence ever in his whole life. Just want to make that clear. And so this peaceful person created this website with the idea of people understanding how a free market would work. And it was based on the non-aggression principle, which, no force, all voluntary, but pretty much other than that, it was an open market, except if someone was exchanging with another person harmed a third party. So for example, there was no child pornography or anything related to pedophilia because that would hurt that child. Or there was no stolen property because obviously the person who was stolen from, that hurt them. Or no violent services, things like that. But drugs were allowed. It was considered, and many libertarians do consider it, a choice that two individuals make. Most commonly exchanged were user amounts of cannabis.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You said that he built a website. right? Silk Road is a website.
Yes.
This
E-commerce website, like
this
eBay. It's like eBay.
website was built with the help of other individuals.
Correct.
And was
Because he's not a programmer. He wasn't
it was
a computer
put on
programmer.
a server, and the server was housed somewhere, and someone maintained that equipment, correct?
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay.
Had to
All
be.
right.
Yeah. But he's not a computer programmer, although a lot of journalists get that wrong. So, yeah, and that came out in the trial, is that a friend who was big part of that. He had
Right.
the idea of a free market. And so drugs were bought and sold, most commonly user amounts of marijuana. And for this, Ross, for the platform, not that he was accused of selling drugs, because he wasn't, he was given a double life sentence without parole at plus 40 years for good measure. No violence. So
This is an unprecedented
oh, yeah.
amount of sentencing. Ross, in cases that you've seen that have gone on in other states or that have gone on with the federal government, have you ever seen a sentence given like this to anybody?
I think there are certainly situations where there are massive sentences given out specifically for murderers and seriously violent offenses. Ross's case is completely different. It is a non-violent offense. It is a first-time offense. His sentence is longer than El Chapo's. Somebody that was committed mass violence across across two countries for decades.
We could even say across entire continents.
Yes, I think
Twice as long as El Chapo.
twice as long as El Chapo's sentence, and I think that
For running a website on a server.
yes,
Essentially,
yeah,
creating
run
it and running it for at least part of the time.
Now, when we talk about what this was actually an experiment in free market.
Correct.
And
He's 26 years old. Let's get that in perspective.
right.
A lot of 26-year-olds don't make the best choices. They might be a little reckless. They get carried away by their enthusiasm. He's now about to be 36. He's not the same young man.
He's not the same person.
He's not going to come out and do it again.
Right.
And he's remorseful. He regrets it. And he's got a lot to contribute because he's very smart. I mean, this took some intelligence to do and some vision, and he just doesn't need to die in prison for this mistake.
Right.
And
Now-
I think that's I just think that's one of the reasons why people have a distrust in our justice system is when you have that comparison, the El Chapo to Ross Ulbricht comparison. Here's somebody, that our justice system is supposed to exist to rehabilitate people and get them back into society to be productive members. And the problem is, in a case like Ross's, that didn't happen. He is remorseful. He feels, he's been in prison for 7 years. Certainly you can make the case that he's rehabilitated.
Yeah.
Why have the 240-year additional sentence?
Right. 2 centuries, essentially.
And I think
Like
it's
you're
It
saying.
is. It's 2 centuries, essentially, is what it is. And,
2 centuries
and
sentence.
it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's death in prison. They say it's life in prison. It's death,
It's death
in prison.
Now, Lyn, let me ask you, on this website that was created by Ross, there were transactions for goods and services,
Correct.
right? And these goods and services, if I understand correctly, were paid for using cryptocurrency.
Yeah, Bitcoin only.
Bitcoin
It's
only.
the only one that
Well, back
existed.
then there was only
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, yeah.
And so they did this in Bitcoin transaction, and there was a store of value from the Bitcoin transaction that Ross was able to keep for the transactions that happened.
Whoever
correct?
was running it, so we're not sure
Whoever was
exactly
running
who.
it,
Yeah.
However,
but,
when. Okay, so
A percentage, just
we're going
like
to come back to
Amazon
to the Bitcoin piece in just a few minutes because I know there's more that we need to talk about with that. So, Lyn, how did the trial transpire? How did the arrest transpire? How did it get moved to trial? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Right. Well, it came out in trial that there was an alternate perpetrator who was the main suspect of the main investigator who was undercover on Silk Road for 2 years and thousands of hours. And he was in hot pursuit of this person named Mark Karpeles. And I'm not saying it was Mark Karpeles, I'm just saying that was what he believed and continued to believe even after Ross's arrest. And it came out in trial that federal agents met with Mark Karpeles's lawyers, and that the lawyers offered a deal because they were closing in on him, their client, and they said, we'll give you a name if you back off our client. And so I assume he gave them Ross's name because shortly thereafter Ross was arrested. And so Ross was involved in Mt. Gox in terms of investing there and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how that all transpired, but that's what came out in trial, was that the name was given to them by the suspect. And so I think personally that the NSA was involved. There's a whole bunch of reasons to think that the NSA was after Bitcoin. Well, it came out, Snowden papers. Snowden revealed this, that the NSA was urgently tracking Bitcoin users, and a little bit before Ross was arrested and Silk Road was taken down. So it's a complicated case.
Now, let's talk. I think that we know that the case lasted only 3 weeks.
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly 3 weeks. Now, Ross.
The trial.
The trial. Ross, looking at a trial like this, and we know that you're not a lawyer, but you are a criminal justice reform activist and you have a little bit of information in your head about how these things work. When we look at something of the magnitude of something going up before a federal court where they may be having multiple charges to talk about against an individual who's been arrested, would you think that 3 weeks is normal length of time for a trial?
No. Trials, especially one of a case as complex as this, get drawn out quite a bit further than 3 months.
3 weeks.
3 weeks, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That it's very abnormal for that to happen, and certainly seems rushed. Especially again considering the complexity of the case, where you're dealing with cryptocurrencies and that are difficult to track. Bitcoin transactions are difficult to track, and all those different moving parts. I think it's certainly seems like the case was pushed very quickly through the process without much accountability.
And just the point, Ross was not permitted to have his Bitcoin witness, Andreas Antonopoulos, world-renowned expert, take the stand to explain to the jury about Bitcoin. And the judge was like, oh no, they understand Bitcoin just fine. I still don't understand Bitcoin. There's no way.
Yep.
They had no clue what was going on there. And that's just one example of how the defense was shut down time and again at this trial.
Now, how many federal investigators were there on this trial? Do you have a number?
On the case?
On the case.
Well, I don't have a number. There are a lot of them because they were all competing to be the one who got the administrator of this site, because it was being pushed, frankly, by Chuck Schumer, and it was a lot of pressure, and they all want the trophy. That's how they operate.
Now,
and so
Chuck
there was,
Schumer, along with federal FBI officials, Comey and Mueller were also involved in this case.
Mueller was, he was the head of the FBI for most of it, and then last month it was Comey.
And the last month it was Comey.
The lead prosecutor was Schumer's right-hand man, Preet Bharara. The judge was recommended to the bench by Schumer. Ross was brought back from California, where he lived and was arrested, to Schumer's state to be tried and sentenced. It just, there was a lot of New York and Chuck Schumer, and I think it was political. I mean, I believe it was about the Bitcoin. It was this new upstart currency that could not be controlled, and I don't think that the financial powers liked it. And I was convinced of this when the other defendants in the case were sentenced, because, for instance, the biggest drug seller on Silk Road got 10 years. And he has the same offense level as Ross. We have 10 years versus double life plus 40 years. And Ross wasn't even accused of actually selling drugs, where this guy was, the biggest seller on there.
He just allegedly owned the website and the server that it was sitting on, correct? Or is it just the website?
I don't know the technical details of that, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's a long time since you've had to go back to talk about the beginning of this.
I assume that whoever owned the website, and it
Now-
depends when, because it's
now-
things are coming out that there's lots of evidence that there were many people running it.
And we've also heard that some of the federal investigators on the case went south on the case.
They're in prison now.
They're in prison now.
Yeah.
Can you talk to that just a little bit so
Sure.
we can let them know how horrible this case was handled from the onset?
Right. There were, as far as we know, there were two. I believe there were more, and I can talk about that in a sec, but there were two investigators at the core of the investigation out of Maryland. One was a DEA agent named Carl Mark Force, and the other was a Secret Service agent on assignment from the NSA named Sean Bridges. And they were able to infiltrate the site, steal a lot of money from vendors there, and they had passwords, keys. They were able to change evidence that was given to the jury with chats on the site and say anything they wanted. They could act as the main administrator, who Ross was supposedly the only one. Dread Pirate Roberts was the name, the handle, DPR for short. They could act as DPR. They could act as other aliases. None of this was permitted to be known to the jury. It was known to the judge. It was known to everyone except the jury. I mean, you know, everyone involved. The defense attorney fought to have it known and to be able to talk about it, and the judge shut that down.
Ross, in these trials, when these things happen, the judge makes the rules. Is that what happens? The judge makes the rules for how the trial is going to be handled?
I'm not an expert on how the judge or the judicial process is set up, especially at the federal court level. So I can't really.
She makes the determination.
Yeah, I can't
Okay,
really.
it's not the rule so much as she decides, are we going to apply this rule, not? What's going to happen? Is that, you know?
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
she
to
can.
be
The judge can certainly determine what evidence can be permissible
Right. Exactly.
in the course of the trial, and I find it pretty abhorrent that evidence was withheld from the jury, considering the fact that, again, those people that were investigating this website went to prison because of the
crimes
way
they
that
committed
handled.
during their
Yes.
investigation.
I mean, and then after trial, more evidence came out. One was that DPR logged in to the Silk Road after Ross was arrested in solitary confinement. Who was that? And then also that some top-level administrator, someone with access, deleted and tampered with a bunch of the evidence. That was proven after trial, but it was too late. And that was probably another corrupt agent. So there's so much about this case that is so wrong. And my son is sitting in a cage because for the rest of his life, unless we can get him out, unless the president will commute the sentence and correct this terrible sentence or something.
Now,
that,
let's talk for a few minutes about when your son Ross was convicted. The trial was over, and he was sent to prison. He's been through 3 different prisons now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And why did those transfers keep happening? Talk to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
The first one was just an automatic. It's like a transitional facility. And actually, he wanted to stay there longer, although it's not the greatest place in the world, to keep working on his case with his lawyers who are based in New York. Then, typically, after the appeal, he would be sent to a penitentiary, which is a maximum security place. That's where he was sent, Florence, Colorado, where some of the most violent and dangerous people go. It's very gang heavy. Ross is completely nonviolent, completely peaceful. When he came in and they were admitting him, they go, "What are you doing in here?"
It's a very dangerous prison.
Very. There were
Yeah.
stabbings, beatings, murders, suicides, all kinds of things that Ross was thrown into.
It's the prison where they put the most dangerous people.
Yeah. It's a step down from the Supermax on the same campus. And here he is, and he managed it. He managed it until what happened was he refused to participate in an assault on another inmate that they had decided was a snitch. And he said, no, I'm not beating some guy up. I don't even, you know. And so because of that, he became a target. You do not say no.
Right.
And so he put himself in protective custody. That amounted to 3.5 months in a metal box, 8 by 10, with
Solitary
no window.
confinement.
Yeah, partially and partially with a, well, let's put it this way. He said, I wish I was back in solitary for my cellmate. It was pretty bad.
Pretty bad cellmate.
But, yeah, but, and then he was finally sent to where he is now, which is still a maximum security prison, which is like, really? For someone, you know, but if they were just going on his offense level, he'd be in a camp. But because he has a life sentence, they automatically will do that, put them in maximum because they think they're a flight risk. And so now he's in USP Tucson, which is where they put people who are targeted in the system that can't go out, because he cannot go back out in there because it's known that he refused to assault someone. So he put his own life at risk to not inflict violence on someone. And this is the person we need to keep in a cage that's so dangerous to society. And I wanted to make another point about the disparity of sentencing, because after Silk Road was taken down, there was another site called Silk Road 2. It was a copycat site, only it was bigger, according to the government, identical but bigger, sold more drugs in a month. The person running that, named Blake Benthall, never did any prison time, and suddenly he disappeared. And I'm like, what happened to that guy, right? His punishment was revealed to be 2 years back taxes. So my son is right now being condemned to die in prison, and the person who did an equivalent, only bigger site, got 2 years back taxes? This is not right in America. The Sentencing Reform Act says that similar crime gets similar punishment. And I'm not saying I want Blake Benthall in prison, but I'd like Ross out. You know, if Ross is so dangerous that he can't be let out ever, how come we're not worried about Blake Benthall?
Exactly. Yep.
You know,
So
there's some corruption there. I don't know what it is exactly, but something's wrong.
let's talk about some progress that Ross has made. Now, I know that because I've seen some documents that you and I have shared with each other, that he is doing some good things while he is inside the prison unit. Let's tell the viewers about some of the things that he's been working on with his fellow inmates.
Sure. That's who Ross is, by the way. He's a very giving, generous, compassionate person. So, you know, he naturally wants to help people. He's taught many classes to allowing people to get their GED, which is equivalent of a high school diploma. He has helped other prisoners get into college in remote courses. There's 100 letters, by the way, on our website from people who actually know Ross, 4 of them being fellow prisoners, to the judge saying, please, this is a good person. Please give him the minimum sentence. And instead, she gave him the maximum sentence that the law would allow. In any case, he has taught many classes, math classes, physics, because he's a scientist and you know, is good at math, yoga, meditation. He's helped many other prisoners write letters to lawyers and that sort of thing because he's educated, and many of them are not. And you know, I think that's one reason he got through this without any real harm to him, is that he's likable. He likes people. He cares about people, and that resonates with people no matter where they are, you know. And so he's been very generous. They've said that in the letters, how generous he was with his time. He would tutor, that sort of thing. And he's continuing to do that now. He's done it all along.
Because that's who he is.
That's who he is.
Yep, that's who he is. Now, you've talked about letters being written in from fellow inmates. I know on the freeross.org website there are also comments that have been added in from people all across the nation. I've gone onto the website and I've read some of these wonderful comments, and you also have been doing your own activism around the United States in different venues, and you've been circulating a nationwide petition. Can you talk about that petition for a few minutes?
Sure. Yeah, we've put up a petition on change.org, which is online. And Ross's has grown to be the second largest clemency petition on that site in much shorter time than the one that's bigger. And it's now passed 250,000 signatures. That's how many people, and actually it's getting into almost 264,000. But you know, that was one of our milestones. 250,000 people want and are asking the president to please correct this injustice. That this is unnecessary. It sets a terrible precedent for excessive sentencing in the United States, which is a problem, and it needs to be commuted. We're not asking for a pardon. We're not saying Ross did nothing wrong, that should be totally exonerated, but that the sentence itself, it's unnecessary, it's terribly expensive for the taxpayer, it is cruel and unusual, which violates the Eighth Amendment, and it needs to be commuted. And so that's all that the petition is asking for that. And you can find it at freeross.org. There's a big red banner to click. It'll go right to the petition. And please, we're asking people to please sign it and share it. And yeah, I mean, it's gotten a great response because it is so shocking. It is wrong.
And we're asking in this petition, we're asking the president to commute his sentence.
Yes, to time served.
We'd like him
to
Let's
be free.
look at how much time has been there. Now, Ross, I want to talk to you about, this leads us into a little bit of the conversation about criminal justice reform. There are programs in the United States that are used to help certain individuals get out of prison, to have their sentences commuted, and I know that there have been some successes. I know that you know about these programs, so can you talk to us a little bit about the way some of this works, because I know that in the end we're looking for a commutation of the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. Time served, let him go.
Yeah, I mean, here's some of the good news is at both the federal level and the state level across the country, there have been massive reforms in the criminal justice space in the past couple years. And we currently have a president who has championed a lot of those, including the First Step Act, which was the first major reform passed in decades at the federal level. And that did start to address sentencing, some of these sentences that were abhorrent, and there have been prisoners that have been released due to that. People like Matthew Charles, who was at the State of the Union last year, and Alice Johnson as well. And I think there's a lot of momentum behind that. There's more momentum behind getting to a Second Step Act and really going after sentencing, especially when it comes to mandatory minimums. Those are all policies that we're trying to correct from the 1990s and before that have been enormously detrimental to the public's perception of the fairness in the criminal justice system. And I personally can't think of a better case to point to than Ross Ulbricht.
I would think he would be the poster boy.
I agree.
Using an old term, poster boy, for this program. Now, there are others around the United States who have also been working. I'm just going to throw some celebrity names out there. Kim Kardashian has been doing some great work in this area, and I know that you've had some communications with her in the past. Is she willing to talk about Ross Ulbricht?
I'm not sure if she knows Ross's story, but I know Kim Kardashian West has really, I absolutely commend her for taking this up as, and she truly does care. I know people that have worked with her in the White House trying to get some of these initiatives passed. And I really commend people that use their celebrity to try and do good in the world. And I really hope she does, learn this story of Ross Ulbricht and take action on it, because it really is the greatest example of a miscarriage of justice in the United States right now.
It is.
Ross did write her a letter. I don't know if she ever got it.
Okay.
But he did write her a letter.
I'm hoping that she got it and that she'll see it. I was reading in media that something like 17 people have been released under her work activity towards criminal justice reform.
That's great.
And that there are something like 45 others cases that she's working on right now.
That's
There's
terrific.
been about
That's great.
a couple thousand so far that have been released due to the First Step Act. It is starting to have an effect on people. We just need to make sure that everybody is hearing some of these really awful stories, so that action is being taken. And if you care about criminal justice reform, if you care about stories like Ross's, take action, share the petition, contact your representatives both in Washington and in Concord, and make sure that they support taking a sensible step, a humane step to encouraging the president to commute some of these sentences.
And another point, which it's just my personal point of view really, but I think that it actually could be beneficial to the president in terms of popularity if he did commute Ross's sentence. And I say that because Ross has a tremendous amount of support, as evidenced by his petition, that from especially the Liberty community and the technological and blockchain communities, because he's a hero to people who are involved in blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, because he's a pioneer. He was a visionary, and he has a lot of support there. So, and he especially has a lot of support in New Hampshire.
Now, I'm glad you said that, because that's leading into exactly where I wanted to go with this. Lyn, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet you several years ago, and we became fast friends. And we've been able to attend conferences together, and I've listened to this story so many times. And you come back to New Hampshire every year, and you give us updates.
Twice a year.
Twice a year. You will
Least.
be here for Liberty Forum, which is the weekend of February 2nd and 3rd. Is that correct?
30, I think. Yeah.
First weekend of February. And then you'll be back
2nd and
again for Pork Fest
right.
in June, which is up in Lancaster, the Liberty Festival that's up in Lancaster on the 3rd week of every June. That's been going on for probably 16 or 17 years now.
Yeah.
That's where we met. And the first time I heard about Ross Ulbricht's case and sentencing and the things that was going on, I was just appalled at hearing all of the horrible ways that it was being handled. And we've been able to hear from you. You come back every year, twice a year, and you give us an update on what's going on. First it was with the trial, and now it's updates with Ross and what type of momentum we're trying to take forward. You also have a special New Hampshire initiative that's going on. And I think that it is important for our New Hampshire viewers to understand that this petition is a direct talk to President Trump. So talk to us about the New Hampshire initiative, and let's let our viewers know what they can do with this as well.
Sure. Well, I've been told, because there's so many people who care about liberty in the state, and Ross has tremendous and concentrated support in New Hampshire. And there are people who've told me that if President Trump commuted Ross's sentence, they would, even though they don't normally vote, they're not even registered, they would register and vote for President Trump. And if he doesn't, they probably just won't vote again. And actually, we could hear from one of them right now.
And basically, there's a lot of supporters of Ross Ulbricht here in New Hampshire. So, and Donald Trump only lost New Hampshire by a few thousand votes. I think 3,000 or 4,000 votes, if I'm not mistaken. And if Trump pardons Ross Ulbricht, it's very likely that a lot of us single-issue voters here in New Hampshire will vote for Trump who wouldn't otherwise. So I think that Trump could win New Hampshire by pardoning Ross Ulbricht, and he could piss off a lot of his enemies like Preet Bharara and Chuck Schumer. So I think it's a win-win for Trump to do so.
If he doesn't pardon him, Are you not going to vote for him?
If he doesn't pardon him, I personally probably won't vote at all. I won't vote for anybody. But if he does pardon him, I'm going to register to vote here in New Hampshire, which is where I live, and vote for Trump as a single issue voter. Yes, absolutely.
All right, you heard it, Trump.
Yeah.
Pardon Ross.
Free Ross, pardon Ross. Clemency for Ross, please. Double life sentence for a website.
But so I agree with Patrick. I feel that that this state would respond positively. Mm-hmm. Another thing that people in New Hampshire are doing and started a trend across the country is, and you were there, Ross, is showing up at rallies that President Trump is holding saying free Ross with signs and talking to media and just making the point that this is a movement and it deserves his attention. And since New Hampshire, there's been people show up at the rallies in Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, next week in New Jersey, and this will continue throughout the election year because there are so many people who fervently believe that this needs to be commuted and we want to get the president's attention. But New Hampshire is like, I consider like headquarters because there's so many people who support Ross and thousands of people here.
Well, I would say that New Hampshire is the leader in liberty in the United States. Right. Our legislators are lean towards liberty and freedom, and our residents here are we're considered the most libertarian state in the United States.
Live free or die.
Live free or die. And when we talk about the active liberty community here, we're talking about around 5,000 people that we know of personally, that are active liberty people in the state. And in our state, because our state only has 1.3 million people, when we go for a vote, whether it's a statewide vote or a county vote or a town vote or whatever, that many people can absolutely sway a presidential election. It can sway a governor's election. It can sway any rep or senator's election. And I think what we're doing with the New Hampshire initiative is saying, we want you to sign this document, and we want to send this document to President Trump so he will know that his base in New Hampshire will grow, and he needs to think about this commutation that we're asking for Ross. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, that people will approve of his commutation for Ross, and that this is something that they want him to listen to. That this will be something that, that thousands of people in New Hampshire will approve of.
And we have hundreds of signature, literally hundreds of signature from New Hampshire on this petition already.
Right.
And we would like to see those numbers grow as well. Mm-hmm. So we would encourage everybody to get onto the New Hampshire petition as well and make sure that President Trump knows that we're watching him and we want him to look at this case. Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about where Ross is and where we're going with all of this, how long would it take this is probably going to be directed at Ross Connolly, how long do you think it takes for these types of cases to make it up through the next step or the first step program?
Well, I think if you're talking about getting the president to commute the sentence, that takes time. Obviously, the president of the United States is a busy person with a lot of advisors and a lot of information coming at him all the time. That's why it's so important to make sure that the people in power in your state, in New Hampshire or elsewhere, are engaged in getting the ear of the president. Because if he's hearing, the same thing from many different angles, you're more likely to listen and take action. And I think it's also great, having the strong show of support at the rallies that gets the president's attention. President Trump believes in second chances, and I think there's no better person to give a second chance to than somebody that has rehabilitated the way that Ross has in prison, helping fellow inmates and, refusing violence. These are things that show a rehabilitated person, and so that we should give that person a second chance at life.
So, Lyn, you're going to be here in New Hampshire for the next week or so?
Yeah, through Liberty Forum.
Through Liberty Forum. And Liberty Forum is going to be at the Best Western out by the airport in Manchester this year, correct? I believe that's where it is. And you'll be there. Liberty Forum, you can buy tickets for Liberty Forum online at, you can look up Liberty Forum. I don't know what the website is, but Lyn will be there this coming next weekend to talk about this situation with Ross, to give everybody updates. You also have some more things, more press planned out for the future, correct? You'll be going to some other conferences in the future?
Yeah, I go to conferences a lot, and one of the things I hear all the time from a lot of young people is, well, I don't think I would vote for Trump, but if he commutes Ross's sentence, I will. People who feel very strongly about this. I run into it all the time. And just a little point, Hillary Clinton won New Hampshire by 2,736 votes. It was the tightest margin after Michigan in the election. That's not that many people. There's what you mentioned, 5,000 liberty people.
Active liberty activists, yeah.
And so there's a possibility of a lot of influence in the election in New Hampshire with a commutation for Ross. And but it's the right thing to do. That's the main reason.
It is the right thing to do.
It's the just thing to do.
Yeah.
It's the thing that is the American thing to do. Sentences like this for nonviolent people didn't used to be given when I was growing
offenders,
up.
first-time offender,
young,
nonviolent person,
young guy.
young, intelligent, very, very, very smart. Ross is a very, very smart young man. And
he's very nice. I mean, I know I'm his mother, but he really is. He's a very good person.
And he's such a good person that even though he's incarcerated, he's doing good inside the facilities where he's being held against his will in a situation where he was given a double life plus 40-year sentence for a nonviolent crime, a first offender, because somebody wanted to make a name for themselves.
And an example.
I call this personally, I call him a political prisoner.
Oh, yeah. It's a political, very
he's
political.
a political prisoner in our own company, in our own country, from our last administration. And that's the way I look at it. They used him to make a point.
Yep.
Well, there's no reason why that should stay the way it is.
Right.
We have an opportunity to correct a wrong, and we should correct the wrong. I don't think in the justice system things don't have to be permanent, and this is a great example of not making it permanent. Let's correct the mistake before it's too late.
Exactly.
Now I know that there are other organizations out there who are also helping. I believe that Young Americans for Liberty has signed on to provide documents to go in a portfolio to be given to President Trump.
Well, many people have done that. Young Americans for Liberty has been very supportive. Students for Liberty, and a lot of young groups. There's a whole long list.
And
there's
also
people.
There's also a list of legislators across the United States who have signed letters, have penned letters to put. I'm one of those that has penned letters to go into this portfolio to be given to President Trump. That we understand at our state levels that this is an injustice. This is a miscarriage of justice, and that the president should look at this case and understand that for the plain simple fact of youth plus first-time offender plus this nonviolent crime being sentenced for what we would consider the type of sentencing would be for the most violent people that would be tried.
The most extreme criminals, the most violent people who are a danger to society, who actually pose a danger. I mean, Ross could be sitting here with us right now having a nice conversation. I don't think anyone would be afraid. In fact, we'd be enjoying it. You know, he's totally peaceful.
And he also has remorse for the whole thing.
Yeah, he does. I mean, like I said, he's 36 now. He was 26. I mean, he's matured. He's like, you know, yeah, I regret it. And not that he wouldn't still care about free markets and all of the motivations.
I care about free markets.
Right.
I think most of the people I know
he's
care
learned
about
a thing
free
or
markets.
two, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think another really important point is that it wasn't just the Bitcoin, but Bitcoin kind of represents an idea, and the fundamental idea there is freedom. And the judge knew it quite well when she said, we know you started the site for philosophical reasons, and I'm just not sure that's a philosophy you've left behind. And essentially she's saying, because I don't know that you've given up your philosophy of free markets, libertarian thinking, and freedom, I'm going to have to cage you for the rest of your life because it's so troubling and dangerous to me. And this is to me, that's a First Amendment problem. We're not supposed to be punished for our philosophy in this country.
That's fascist ideology.
Totally.
Yeah.
And his libertarian ideas were not permitted to be known at trial. A lot of things, the narrative was very carefully constructed. But it's like, yeah, it is. It's saying you have this belief, and so I'm going to use it, at least in part, to enhance, well, I'm using it to enhance my sentence, if nothing else. And that's a problem.
How many amendments does that break? I mean, constitutionally.
Well, this case has broken a lot.
It has broken a lot. But I mean, all, the First Amendment is shattered.
Absolutely.
With the actions of the judge. The First Amendment is shattered.
Yeah.
If not more than the First Amendment.
Well, there was questions of the Fourth Amendment and the way they conducted the investigation. There's the Sixth Amendment where she used uncharged allegations to enhance her sentence as well, which is completely antithetical to the Sixth Amendment, which was written to protect the accused from that exact thing. You're supposed to be tried by a jury of your peers instead of a judge saying, well, I don't care if the jury didn't rule on it. I think it's true, so yep. And you know, there's so many violations in this case, and that puts us all in peril. That weakens all of our protections.
For every single person. Unfortunately, this happened to Ross, but people need to take note that if it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody else.
Absolutely.
You know, you get yourself into some strange predicament, and all of a sudden, what happens? Look what happened to Ross.
Don't go to trial, I can tell you that. We've lost fair trials because you will be punished. You will be given a much more extreme punishment if you lose, which you probably will because the deck is stacked against the defendant. And so that's why 98% of people plea, because they're bullied and threatened by prosecutors. And not only they are threatened, but their families are threatened. And I've heard this many times and from the people. And this isn't how our justice system is supposed to work. And obviously, there's people pleading to things they didn't do, because that's a pretty high percentage. So, no, I went into this thinking we have a fair, just system. We will see justice done in this trial. And I left totally disillusioned, feeling like our great American values have been hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
And that we are not guaranteed a fair trial, that prosecutors run the courtroom, and that, it's very alarming.
Well, Lyn, we know that we're all going to continue to be on your team. We're going to continue to push for Ross Ulbricht's release. I believe that everybody should have a second chance in life. You know, many people have done things that they regretted. They've spent time in prison for it. They've been incarcerated, or they've had some other type of justice laid down on them for something that they've done, and they've been given second chances. I personally believe that Ross Ulbricht needs a second chance. While we get ready to close up this program here today, Ross Connolly, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this?
I'd just like to add, even though intentions, often don't matter as much, Ross Ulbricht's intention in setting up the website was to make the world a safer place.
It's true.
That was his intention, and I don't think that him operating a website that he thought was going to help the world is something that he should spend the rest of his life in prison for. I think that is a sad state of affairs in America if that's where we're at, that we should be sending those people and prioritizing those people to put them in prison instead of pushing resources towards those who actually threaten society at large. I think it's a problem throughout the entire system, and changes need to be brought to change the whole system and how it operates. And I think starting with Ross is a great place to start. As this checks off every box for the problems in the system that need to be corrected.
Lyn, I know that you're going to be here for the next week. Is there some closing statement that you want to make to the viewers here?
Well, like I said, I went into this a patriotic person who, and I still am very much so for the ideals of our country, but I'm very concerned about our country after what I've seen. And to have someone railroaded like Ross was for political purposes, I believe, and so many others. He's not unique. There's, according to the Sentencing Project, there's around 17,000 nonviolent people serving life in this country. That's insane and very expensive. I feel like we're really at a tipping point in history and in our country right now. And maybe that sounds too dramatic, but I feel like we can either go towards more freedom, getting our constitutional protections back, and really going towards innovation and not overly punishing people to the point where they and their families are destroyed, or we're going to go towards a surveillance state who's controlling people, weaponizing the justice system against them, and much less freedom. And it's up to us. I believe we're at that point in history, and I think that my eyes have been opened, and I think we need to wake up.
Well, I agree with both of you in what you said. I think that that Ross is the poster boy for criminal justice reform. I think that I would like to say to all of our viewers out there, and I would like to talk directly to President Trump, we would like for you to look at the case of Ross Ulbricht. Or we would like for you to understand that he has already served over 2,300 days in a maximum security prison for a nonviolent crime as a first offender. We would like for you to know that while he's there, he's helping others achieve goals, lifetime goals that they've had in getting their GEDs, in learning how to use computer programs, and continuing on with their education in school. He has been in jeopardy inside the prison system while he's been incarcerated. His life has been threatened. He's had to be put in solitary confinement and transferred from prison to prison for his safety so that he would live inside the prison system. This nonviolent first-time offender was given a double life plus 40 years, and that is the biggest miscarriage of justice I've seen in my entire life. On that note, viewers, we're going to see you back here next week. We hope that you enjoyed the show. I'd like to thank Lyn Ulbricht for coming in to see me. Lyn, it's always a pleasure.
Always.
Ross, it's
Thank you,
always a
Herschel.
pleasure. Thank you for being on the program today. We're going to come back next month with some legislative action from the State House. As our bills start moving through the House, we'll get some votes. We'll come in and we'll talk about the real issues of the bills instead of some of the things that you hear online and social media. Tune in. This will be a show that I will remember for a very long time. And I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity to follow up with you again
Anytime.
in a few months whenever you're back in town.
That'd be great.
And we'll keep everybody informed. There are going to be some links that are going to be added to the end of the show where you can contact freeross.org if you want to sign the petition. We urge you to go out there, look over the website, look at the videos that are out there, look at the petition, sign the petition. If you live in New Hampshire, sign the New Hampshire petition. We really want President Trump to understand that this is an issue in criminal justice reform and that we want him to seriously take a look at this and let this young man out of his cage. Have a good day, folks.
We'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to today's program. Each month, we'll bring you new information about legislation that's being proposed in our state capital. If you'd like to find us or comment on our program, contact us on Facebook at Granite's Edge. We also have a YouTube channel by the same name. Links that were mentioned in our program today will be listed there for your convenience. Tune in next time to Granite's Edge.